All right, what's going on, everybody? We're going to have some fun today. Well, I guess it won't be that fun because we're talking about Afghanistan, but it'll be a good conversation, I think. Hello there, Arnold. You're already in. Awesome. Happy Tuesday. I'm looking forward to this one. Let me know you're alive in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and get started because I've got a lot to cover, a lot more than usual. But as always, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Like this video, hit that share button so we can get some more people in here. I really appreciate it. Also, if you want to support my work, you can support my online community at afreshperspective.locals.com. And it's only $5 a month, and you get access to premium content that other people don't get. Also, remember that LibertyNation.com is a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. Check out LibertyNation.com for all your conservatarian news, original articles and analysis, videos, podcasts, Liberty Nation Radio, and their signature TV program, The Conservative Five, all on LibertyNation.com, conservative news where truth matters. Now then, let's see. Yes, you're right, David Gray. This is a grim Sunday. It's been a grim weekend. Not very pleasant. And it's troubling on a few different levels, and we're going to get through all of them as fast as I can. Let me make sure that this is okay. Okay, yeah, all right. And let me take that off. But yeah, I do want to talk about Afghanistan. And, if you follow me, you know that I've been looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to us finally getting our troops out of Afghanistan. And I even said a few months ago when President Biden announced that he was going to be ending the Afghanistan war, I said, if he actually does this, I'm going to praise him for it. Because I've been wanting this to happen since a long time ago. But I mean, Trump, he tried to get it done. He didn't. He did draw down a lot of our troops. I mean, we had about 15,000 when Trump took office. And at the end of his presidency, we were down to about 2,500. So not bad. And then Biden is finishing the job. Now, however, there is criticism about how Biden is getting that job done. And it's not very good. And a lot of the criticism is warranted. I would say most of it is. So I said earlier on Twitter that I'm probably not going to be quite as hard on him as others have been. I'm not sure how that's going to go because I have a lot of criticism. But regardless of the mistakes he's making, I'm going to say up front, it's a good thing that we are ending this war. There was no point in us being in there in the first place, and it needed to happen. And I shouldn't say we shouldn't have been there as long in the first place. I mean, the initial invasion, I was fine with. I mean, we had to do what we had to do. But honestly, we should have pulled out by the end of Bush's presidency, honestly. I see no reason for us to have been there for so long. But we were, on this whole nation building trip, which I'm going to be talking about. And I actually interviewed a deputy undersecretary of defense who actually served under George W. Bush. I don't think he was there from the beginning, but he's been in the military for a long time, and he served under the Bush administration, and he had some very interesting things to say. So I'm going to share some snippets of that interview, not the whole thing. It was about 12 minutes long. I did put the link in the show notes, so definitely watch that because his insight was very interesting as a decorated veteran. Now, first, I want to talk about Biden's remarks that he made yesterday. He did make a speech, and this got very much criticized. I don't think that all the criticism is fair as far as his remarks, and I'll see what you guys think about that. But I do think that a lot of it was warranted. So, as you know, the whole thing didn't go very well, did it? Like, over the past week, maybe even a little bit longer, the Taliban has had a huge resurgence, and it rapidly took over capital city after city after city, not capital city because there's only one capital, but they were taking over large swaths of land all in the region, and it seemed like they weren't meeting with very much resistance. And over the weekend, the situation got even worse. And Biden was being rightly criticized for not getting in front of a camera and addressing the nation. He did release a statement on Saturday, but it was a written statement, and he was vacationing at Camp David while this stuff was going on. Again, not a good look, not a very good look as far as optics go. And it got bad enough to where he flew back on Monday to the White House to give his remarks. He took no questions and then flew right back to Camp David. Now, personally, he should have just given the speech at Camp David. There would have been nothing wrong with that. But I know he had to look out for the optics, and people would have criticized him from giving the address from Camp David. And if that had happened, I would have defended him, because I'm like, why fly back to the White House just for that? Plus, when the presidents go to Camp David, they don't necessarily stop working. That place is outfitted so that they can still work on when they're on vacation. So to me, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. And I don't care if it was Trump or Biden or whatever. You guys know me. I'm not a fan of President Biden, but I'm going to be fair to a Democrat, just like I would be to a Republican. So he decided to address the nation. And if you saw the speech, it was about 15 to 18 minutes long or so. He spent a lot of that doubling down on his decision to remove troops from Afghanistan. Now, a lot of people didn't like that he did that because it sounded like he was making a straw man argument, because most of America is on board with ending the Afghanistan war. However, I kind of understand why, because when I was watching the media, and they weren't doing this overtly, but I kind of got the sense that they were trying to make the American public regret pulling out. Because even before it got to this point, even before we realized what the Taliban was doing, they were already saying, well, eventually the Taliban is going to take over. It's going to be bad for the people there, yada, 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 yada. And it's not necessarily that they're wrong. It's just at a certain point, we can't stay there forever. We can't put our people in harm's way forever. We can't keep spending money on that forever. And as you can see, we were essentially fighting a war that the Afghani people didn't really want to fight. This doesn't account for all Afghani people, but I mean, obviously the ones that counted were not willing to fight. So he opened up his remarks by reiterating the reasons why we got into Afghanistan in the first place, September 11th, and all of that. And he did say, quote, that our Americans' mission in the region was, quote, was never supposed to have been nation building or creating a unified, centralized democracy. That's not quite true, but that may have been his opinion back then, to be fair. But yeah, the Bush administration wanted to nation build. I mean, there's just no way. That's why they went to Afghanistan. That's why we went into Iraq, because we were going to rebuild that nation too, just like we did with Japan after World War II. But obviously, we're not very good at that anymore. And also at points in his speech, he did seem to be trying to blame former President Trump, which he had done even before that speech, which is absolutely ridiculous, reprehensible, because he knows good and hell well that what's happening in Afghanistan right now has nothing to do with Trump. He said, oh, well, he already made this deal with the Taliban. Okay, but he's not president anymore. You are. And on top of that, the Taliban already violated the deal. So you don't have to honor it anyway. So it's not the deal that led to this. It's what you did after you got into office, President Biden. So he did talk about, he said, quote, the choice I had to make as your president was either to follow through on that agreement or be prepared to go back to fighting the Taliban in the middle of the spring fighting season. There would have been no ceasefire after May 1st. There was no agreement protecting our forces after May 1st. There was no status quo stability without American casualties after May 1st. There was only a cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, which will lurch into the third decade of this conflict. So that was kind of like a word salad there. It didn't really need to be said because the agreement was for May 1st and you already didn't honor it. By the way, and I agree with him not honoring that agreement because the Taliban had already broken it. And I do agree with his rationale that he didn't want to have a situation where he had to send more forces back into Afghanistan. Well, guess what? He's done that anyway, right? Now, to be fair, they're not engaging in combat operations, at least not as far as I know, not yet. But the reason he had to send them back is because the planning on this just broke down. It was horrible. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But as far as his remarks go, I will give him credit for this. He did take some responsibility for not planning appropriately for this. I mean, because if you remember about a week or two ago, he was talking about how this wouldn't be another Saigon. This wouldn't be the same situation where we were having people airlifted out of Vietnam because we were pulling out and we didn't plan for it properly. But the issue is that it ended up being worse. This will likely be worse than what Saigon was. And I think that was Biden's mission accomplished moment. If you remember when George W. Bush with the Iraq War, he came out and said mission accomplished. He had that big sign, that banner behind him. And then things got worse. The situation deteriorated and we had to do the surge to tamp it down. This is Biden's mission accomplished moment. Now, I'm not going to say it's as significant as Bush's because more people died because of that. And hopefully that we won't have more people die because of this. But again, it could get that bad. And now I'm trying not to get ahead of myself here, but I'll be talking about that a little bit too. So he did say the truth is this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. Now, there's something about this. Like this either belies a level of incompetence that we should all be disturbed by, or Biden is lying his ass off, or both. And that'll come later as far as what the intelligence community was telling the White House. Then he proceeded to talk about the Afghani military. He got bashed for this. He said, quote, Afghanistan political leaders gave up. They fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometimes without trying to fight. If anything, the development for the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. Now, people were criticizing that because he appeared to be trying to pass blame for why this whole thing went down. However, he's right. That is what happened. Now, again, does that excuse his not being prepared for this? No, it does not. But he's not lying when he says this. I mean, there are news reports about this. This isn't just coming from the White House. This actually happened. And he rightly said, quote, American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves. 100% correct. So, again, he doubled down on his decision to leave Afghanistan and end the war. He tried to blame Trump. He also blamed the Afghan military. His blaming Trump was absurd. Like I said, it's ridiculous. Nobody's going to believe that it's Trump's fault except for people who already want to believe it anyway. But there's some truth to what he said about the Afghan military. So before I go on, I want to play a couple clips from the interview that I did. And one of the questions that I asked Dave Patterson is, was there a scenario under which we could have gotten out of Afghanistan without the Taliban taking over? So I want to share his response with you. Let me grab that really quick. Nope, not that one. Let me grab it. All right, hold on one second. I thought I had it up, but I don't. Let me get it real quick. What the heck? Sorry, my computer wasn't cooperating with me. It's probably the Russians. Okay. Almost got it. Let's start focusing on beautiful. Bear with me. Okay. All right, nation building. People kind of argue that maybe we should have stayed longer, but here's my question. Do you think it's realistic to think that there's any scenario under which we could pull our troops out, without leading to what's going on right now as far as the Taliban retaking control?
Well, that's a difficult question. But nonetheless, since you asked it,
yeah, I got to keep you on your toes.
I think that we would have been hard pressed we could have had a smoother solution, but I believe we would have hard pressed to come to any other outcome. When you stop having a military objective with military goals, and you start having nation building, which quite frankly, we are horrible at. I mean, we've never really been very successful at bringing failed nations into the 21st century. And we shouldn't do that. We are a country that our best qualities are providing an example and a model for others of a free and open society. They have to be the ones to see that model and attempt to emulate it. You can't force that, or even, in residence, try to encourage that. It has to be something that they want to do, and it has to be a core value for them, which in Afghanistan, unfortunately, it's not.
Okay, so that's pretty much where I stand on it too. I mean, I figured that he was going to say that, but at the same time, so a lot of people have criticized the decision, saying that, well, we could have done it in a way that the Taliban wouldn't have taken over. Guys, this was always going to happen. And again, I'm not taking away from Biden's lack of planning, which I'm going to get into, but if we'd have done this 5 years from now, the Taliban would have taken back over. If we'd have done this 5 years ago, the Taliban would have taken back over. This was always going to happen. And then after this, I asked Dave about his thoughts as far as the notion that Afghani soldiers just didn't want to fight. And I'll play what he said really quick. Yeah, it is unfortunate. I mean, and one that kind of actually leads me to my next question. I saw that Jake Sullivan, who was President Biden's national security advisor, he said that just earlier today, he said that one of the reasons why the Taliban found it so easy to take over again is because the Afghani army lacked the will to fight against the Taliban for control of the country, that the army just didn't want to fight. Do you see that as a failure on America's part, or do you think this is something deeper, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, I think it's something that, Sullivan is going to have to reflect on, because it's something that most people who have been to Afghanistan, most of the people coming back as fighters, as the diplomatic corps, could have told you that very same thing. Because we've seen it throughout our experience there. We've tried to encourage something else, but nonetheless, when faced with the Taliban or the people, the indigenous folks there in the villages and the tribes, and immediately go over to the Taliban, because they operate out of fear. I mean, you take a village leader and behead him in front of everybody. That's going to be a motivating moment.
So, like I said, this was always going to happen. And that kind of goes to a question that I saw in the chat. Daniel Durham, you asked a few good questions here. How come our intelligence units were not aware of the Taliban giving regional commanders money to desert? Well, who says they weren't aware? You just led me to the next thing I'm going to talk about, because our intelligence knew about all of this, and I'm not going to bash them, because from the reports that I'm reading, they did what they were supposed to do. They told the White House, they told the Biden administration what was going on. But before I go further, I'm just going to see what other people got to say. Oh, wow, you guys had a lot to say. Megan Cox, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate you. You are wonderful. All right. Yep, Scott Messick. Of course it needed to happen. It was the how. Yep, that's true. I mean, most people don't have a problem with us leaving Afghanistan, but I mean, it's even Democrats are bashing Biden right now. I mean, there is no way that they're going to be able to spin this. And honestly, the activist media doesn't even seem to be trying to spin this as much as they normally would. I'm kind of surprised. I want to kind of follow more of what they're saying, but they're not spinning this very much, at least not from what I'm seeing. What else we got? Ending is David Gray. Ending is good, but it's hard to imagine a more inept and treacherous way of doing it. And you know what sucks about this, David and everybody else? We do this. This is what we do. We'll have allies that we prop up, and then we leave them to hang dry. I mean, think of like the Bay of Pigs invasions with the Cubans. And we've done this, and we got to stop doing this. I mean, you can't go into the country saying, "Hey, if you want to overthrow your government and you want to have democracy, we're going to back you all the way." And then 5 minutes later, we're like, "Oh, we're just kidding. We got to go." Now, in the case of Afghanistan, it wasn't 5 minutes, but still, we need to stop doing this. And part of the tragedy of this whole thing is that it doesn't seem like the Biden administration prepared as far as getting our personnel out of the embassy. They shouldn't have had been burning documents and get rushed out of there. We should have already been drawing that down, which is what a lot of people have been saying. And we should have been doing the same thing for the Afghani people who allied with the U.S. military, the translators, the other people who helped us. We should have already had a plan to get them out of there. And that was a huge failure. And those deaths will be on Biden's hands. I hate to say it because I don't want them to die. I mean, this is an area where I'm okay. Bring those refugees over. It's not going to hurt our country. No, we have a moral obligation because we put them in that situation. So I'm going to go. Yeah, you guys got too much questions here for me to get to. I have to keep it moving. Okay, Daniel Durham. Do you believe that having regional commanders deserting affected the morale and willingness of the Afghan soldier to fight and die? I think it's a lot of things. I think that's a factor. There's also the fact that the Taliban was paying him off. There's also the fact that a lot of these soldiers were in league with the Taliban in the first place. And we've known this for years. There's also the fact that, and one other thing that I talked to Dave about, I won't play that clip, but he talked about how they had become reliant on our firepower, on specifically our air superiority. And he did list that as one of the mistakes that Biden made when doing these plans. If he wanted to keep the Taliban at bay, at least in areas where troops were and people that we wanted to evacuate were, we could have been droning the hell out of them. And we do have the technology to make sure that we would just hit them. So that would have been more of a deterrent. It would have prevented the Taliban from taking back over, but it would have held them at bay for a while so that we can get our people out of there so that we can organize better. But I think that was part of it because their military, the Afghani military, which we propped up, was heavily reliant on our ability to kick ass from the sky. I can't remember not Hellfire missiles. It was a different type of system that Dave brought up, and I cannot remember the name of it. But suffice it to say, they relied a lot on our air power, and they were going to be losing that, and they knew it. If anything, we should have trained them to be able to fight these wars without air power. But again, I don't even think that would have worked. You can't teach people how to build a democracy if they don't really want it. If that's not really what they want to fight for. There are Afghanis who do want to fight for that, but not enough. One thing that Dave said is that, the difference with the Japanese, if you're going to nation build, the only way you can do that is if you completely crush the will of the enemy to fight. And at the end of the end of World War II, when we dropped those atomic bombs, their spirit was broken. They didn't want war anymore. And we said, okay, we're going to help build you back up. And they were all down with it. Same thing with Germany, too. Same thing. Like, they have to not be wanting to fight for what they have anymore. They have to be willing to usher in a new age. That's not going to happen in Afghanistan. Russia's already tried it. I believe the British did too. It's not going to happen anytime soon. So now it's China. Now it looks like it's China's turn, but that's a whole different can of worms. So let's keep going. Also, the Afghan soldier was not getting paid for several months, though we were paying them. Oh, I didn't know about that. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that. Let's see. All right. So I'm going to go on to the next thing here. And I want to talk about just the ineptitude of this whole thing. I've gotten past his speech. Again, his speech wasn't really where I was going to bash him a whole lot. It's what actually happened on the ground. So here's one thing. Now, so remember when I talked about how he said that they didn't expect things to get out of hand like that. They didn't expect that for the Taliban to be able to take so much territory so quickly. There's evidence that that's not quite true. Because like you asked earlier, Daniel, like the intelligence did know all this stuff. They did their job. Senator Marco Rubio, who is a ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, he called BS on this statement. He put out a tweet that said, quote, "This administration was specifically told Afghan forces would surrender faster than our ability to exit. They decided to ignore these warnings and smugly tell everyone how smart and brilliant they are." Yeah, Rubio didn't mince words there. So in a piece for the Washington Examiner, the Washington Examiner spoke with a senior intelligence official, and they said that they had, quote, "noted the troubling trend lines in Afghanistan for some time, with the Taliban at its strongest militarily since 2001. This guy also said that strategically, a rapid Taliban takeover was always a possibility. Now, to be fair, they didn't give an exact definition of what they meant by rapid, but the guy also said, quote, "The question all along was whether Afghan government and military would be cohesive enough and have the willpower needed to exercise its military capabilities to resist the Taliban. As the Taliban advanced, they ultimately met with little resistance." Again, there weren't a whole lot of bullets fired in this whole thing, as far as what it could have been, right? Other officials said the same thing. ABC News, an intelligence official told ABC News that, quote, "No one listened when they told the administration it would take no time at all for the Taliban to take everything." Yet another official said, quote, "The intelligence community assessment has always been accurate. They just disregarded it." Now, is there a chance that these officials could be lying themselves? Yes, there is that possibility, but I'm sorry. On this one, I believe them. I believe them. There is no way that our intelligence community would not have known about this. They might have gotten some details wrong here and there. They might have a different timeline. Maybe they thought it would happen in 10 days, but it really happened in more like 3, 4, or 5 days. But they knew that this was going to happen. And realistically, there's no way that they didn't tell the Biden administration, because that would be their jobs right there. That'd be their asses. They'd all get fired. And on top of that, they would all get the blame, and the press would give them the blame. So to me, there's just the likelihood that they wouldn't have known about what was going on, and the likelihood that they wouldn't have told Biden is so small that I can't even believe it. I don't buy what Biden is saying. Now, to be fair, Biden could have just forgotten what they told him. All right, I'm sorry, I had to throw that in there. But here's even worse. Like I said, they didn't plan for how they were going to extricate Americans from that situation. Again, you had people burning documents in the U.S. Embassy. And by the way, every one of those people is out now. But the job isn't done. We have got Americans in Afghanistan who can't get to the airport in Kabul because the Taliban has set up checkpoints, and they have been looking for Westerners. They have been looking for Afghanis who allied with the U.S. military. And while the Taliban is playing a PR game right now, they are killing these people. I mean, I've heard rumblings of Christians getting crucified. These people are brutal. They may not be going all out right now, but they are doing stuff that we don't know about. They recently seized everybody's weapons in Kabul. They went around saying, "Okay, you're all safe now. We're going to take care of you. You don't need a weapon." Does that sound a little bit familiar? I wrote a piece about that, about how that reminds us how important the Second Amendment is, isn't it? So John Kirby, a spokesman for the Department of Defense, He admitted recently, I believe it was on CNN, that the number of Americans trapped in Afghanistan could be up to 10,000. 10,000. It may not be that high, but I mean, I would have thought maybe it was maybe like 100 or 200 that just didn't get to the airport fast enough. No. The thousands of Americans are stranded. And like I said, the terrorists are looking for these people. Now, I did see a report that our military has been in contact with leaders of the Taliban, and they've gotten them to agree not to mess with American citizens, but we know how good their word is. So, I mean, I was praying for these people today. Like, this is serious. I know a lot of people are like, oh, we don't need to care about what goes on in Afghanistan. Okay, well, but we've got our people there too. And this doesn't even account for the Afghanis who allied with us. And like I said, we have a moral obligation to get them out of there. We don't have a moral obligation to just take every single person from Afghanistan. We don't. I don't believe that. But at the very least, getting our people out there and the people who joined with our military, put their lives on the line, put their families' lives on the line because they wanted something better. I mean, they wouldn't have been in that position if we didn't invade and then stay there for a million years. So again, if Biden doesn't get them out, it's going to look horrible for him. And again, even the media and Democrats have turned on him on this issue. Not all of them. Again, I'm sure there's some out there that are still caping for him. I'm sure there's still people out there, trying to, defend him. But this is going to hurt not just Biden. It's going to hurt the Democrats in 2024. Whether it's Biden or Kamala Harris who will be running in 2024. Well, either way, it'll be her, I guess, whether she's president at that time or not, because if Biden steps down, we don't know that yet. I still stand by my contention that Biden's going to step down after the midterms and Kamala will take over. But either way, it'll be her running. That's who the Democrats have thrown in with for some reason. Yeah, it ain't going to work. There will be a Republican president who is elected in 2024, because at this point, I don't know that there's something dumb enough that the Republicans could do to lose in 2024. Biden has not even served a full year yet, and he has messed up so much. And this process, and I know I'm not in the government, so it's easy for me to say, it's easy for all of us to say, but I'm sorry, this should have been a slam dunk. Like, I don't see how you mess this up. I would expect for there to have been mistakes along the way, whether it was Trump, Biden, or whomever. I would have expected for things to not go quite to plan. Like they say in the military, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. So even if Biden had done this competently, there would have been some issues. And honestly, I probably would have defended him, because I expect for there to be some mishaps along the way. But this is more than just a few mishaps. This is horrible. And this is just what we know right now. I mean, this situation is ongoing. There could be other stuff that happens because of the poor planning. I mean, you have people at the Kabul airport trying to hang on to the landing gear of airplanes. And you saw the footage, I'm sure, of people falling down off the plane as it took off. It's heartbreaking. And you know what that reminds you of. We saw that on 9/11. And this issue is so deep because we see what happened on 9/11. And 9/11 is what led to today. Without 9/11, we wouldn't be in Afghanistan, hopefully. And now we're seeing that the way it's ending. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but there are parallels here. Like, nobody missed the irony of that, seeing those bodies fall from that plane out of desperation, trying to save their lives. And to me, I don't know how Biden will turn this around, because, and then maybe he doesn't care because he knows he's not going to serve more than one term anyway. But the Democrats should be afraid right now. I mean, I'm talking politically. I mean, this is going to hurt them politically. So before I go on to the next thing, let's see what you guys got to say. Never underestimate the stupidity of the GOP. I will say that it would have to be some very, very creative stupidity to do something more absurd than what Biden's doing right now. And it's kind of hard at this point because they don't have the power to do anything stupid. Okay, let's see. Yeah, you guys are fired up today. All right. Philonic Crouch. Also, we should have left in winter when the fighting season was not going on. They asked us to wait to leave in the winter. That probably would have made sense. I mean, we did leave at a very inopportune moment. But I do know that Biden was under pressure to get our troops out of there. But I mean, speaking for myself personally, if he had waited a few more months, I wouldn't like it, but I would understand because I want us to be safe. It's not just about getting out of Afghanistan. You've heard this said many times. It's not just about getting out of Afghanistan. It's about doing it the right way. And we didn't do it the right way. Yeah, Papa Potep. 10,000. Yeah. Up to 10,000 people. Like, why wouldn't they have thought about, how do you not think about this stuff before? I don't get it. I know I don't know what it's like to be president, but I don't understand how you miss that. Like, how do you not think about that? Let's see. And I can't, and I know the buck stops here when it comes to the president. I know that saying, but it's not just the president. It's his team that is just so inept. Like, he's not doing this all himself. He's got a team, and he, as much as people made fun of who Trump hired, he needs to start firing some people. I don't know. The GOP won't mess things up. GOP, hold my beer. Yeah, they're going to say, hold my Bud Light. Let's see. William Carter. The reason Biden has to own this is because he said last month that this outcome would not happen. Yeah, you're right. You know what's that? I really wanted to defend him on this. I really did, because I thought he was. I still think he's doing a good thing by getting us out. But man, like at first I was like, okay, I get it. At first it was like, okay, things aren't going according to plan. I get it. I don't see the reason to criticize him just yet. And then it got worse, and I'm like, dude, I'm trying to help a brother out here, but you got to help me help you. Oh man. What else we got? Miss Picking Sock, thank you so much for the super chat, sis. I appreciate you. Unless we change the top, the GOP is feckless. Yep. And I will say that they are. I know they're going to be using this politically. They've already started, so they should be. But man, okay. So before I go on to the next thing here, just want to remind you to don't forget to head on over to libertynation.com, a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. Now, when you're at libertynation.com, you can read the articles, or you can sign up for the daily briefing or the member zone where you get premium content. And you also get other TV programs like the Conservative 5. I'm involved in that. And you just saw Liberty Nation TV. I showed you a clip from that. So I host that every week. So definitely check that out. But again, you're going to get cutting edge news and analysis with none of the stupid spin and all of the nuance that the others aren't giving you. So check out new and original material on libertynation.com, conservative news where truth matters. Now, I want to touch a little bit. I don't want to go too deep into this because I just don't want to. But the media in the lead up to this whole fiasco, it was just, I was watching them, and it was very interesting to see how they were covering this, because the media typically at least pretends to be anti-war. But I noticed that a lot of outlets were putting out articles and reports focusing only on the resurgence of the Taliban. This is before it got as crazy as it did, and focused on, what's going to happen afterward. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have reported on these things. But even in the reports where they had experts on to talk about it, they only had on experts to talk about how horrible the situation would be after we left. They didn't have people like Dave Patterson on there just to talk about how, yes, this is horrible, but we're not good at nation building. We're making the situation worse. I didn't see a lot of that. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but I didn't see a lot of it. So, and then one of them, there was a report from Bloomberg. They put out an article. And the author, Ruth Pollard, she suggested that us leaving Afghanistan will embolden terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, because ISIS is still a thing, just not as much as it was before. Al-Qaeda is making a resurgence, and that's something I'll probably talk about either later this week or next week. This is an issue that's coming up. I mean, and especially when we're dealing with our border situation, those two things can be linked. But I'll talk about that on Friday, because I wrote an article about that today that'll probably come out tomorrow or sometime later this week. But in her article for Bloomberg, she wrote, quote, "Jihadist groups based in the country, some with transnational agendas like Al-Qaeda, now have a template for defeating governments backed by major powers and have been emboldened by the Taliban's lightning-fast advance. This is happening as the jihadi ecosystem is experiencing the lowest counterterrorism pressure in the last 2 decades, effectively getting free rein." Now, I don't know about that last claim, the lowest counterterrorism pressure in the last 2 decades. I'm not convinced about that. I mean, maybe right now at this moment, but all throughout the Trump administration, that wasn't the thing. Like, he was on their asses. He decimated ISIS. So they're essentially saying that this could inspire other radical Islamic terrorist groups to start stepping up their efforts. So Hussein Haqqani, who was Pakistan's former ambassador to Washington, he told Pollard, quote, "The Taliban remain connected to Al-Qaeda and other international terror groups by ideology, shared finances, and training, and even marriage." And he continued, quote, "Given that jihadists do not think much of international borders and consider the current global order un-Islamic, it is only a matter of time before they set their sights on Europe and the US again." So that was a report. And then there was another one, NPR, and I've seen NPR publish a few different pieces about this, stating that us leaving Afghanistan will result in the rise of more Islamic terrorism. In one of these articles, it stated that Afghanistan could become a, quote, safe haven for terrorists. And they had on former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta. I think I can't remember who he served under, but he said, quote, "If they take control of let me start over. If they take control of Afghanistan, there is no question in my mind that they will provide a safe haven for Al-Qaeda, for ISIS, and for terrorism in general." He said, quote, "And that constitutes, frankly, a national security threat to the United States." And there were a bunch of other reports on the same thing. The Washington Post also noted that it would cause our allies to distrust the United States. And here's the thing: when I first read that was last week, and I didn't buy it. But after what's happened now, they have a point. they do have a point, because we are not doing right by the Afghani people who helped us. Now, when it comes to terrorism, a few things. Everything that they're saying is possible. I'm not going to say it's definitely going to happen, but it is possible. This could lead to a surge in radical Islamic terrorist activity. However, I don't believe for a second that the Taliban would be stupid enough to do now what they did before 2001. I don't buy it. I'm not saying that they won't have relationships with terrorists. In some extent, in some areas, they were trying to tamp down on terrorism because they didn't want to piss us off. But that doesn't mean that they won't still have relationships with Al-Qaeda and other groups. But I do not think that it will be the way it was before, where they have just straight out terrorist training camps. They've got bin Laden planning 9/11. They've got stuff like that happening because they don't want us to come back over there. And they know that we will. We will go back over there if we have to. Probably not under Biden, but under a Republican president. And maybe even some Democrats, because Obama didn't play around either. We just didn't know about it because we didn't see it as much. But I don't think that they want to go through that again, because even though they waited us out, that wasn't pleasant for them. They weren't in power. They were getting killed by us quite a bit. I don't think that they don't want to mess around and find out again. However, that doesn't mean that that groups like Al-Qaeda still won't do what they're trying to do. They don't necessarily need Afghanistan to do that. So we do have to, keep an eye on what's going on. But it's just interesting to me that, again, that the media focused mostly on that angle and didn't talk to people who might have a different perspective on it. People who might say, yeah, well, that's possible, but we're still post 9/11. So we're keeping more of an eye on these things than we did before. And I don't believe for a second, like I said, that when we're out of Afghanistan, that we're not still going to be monitoring what's going on there. I mean, that's basically what Trump said. Like when he wanted to pull everybody out, he said, we're still going to be watching. We're still going to be keeping up our intelligence in that area. We are going to monitor it. And if there's something that we don't like, we can always go back. I hope that doesn't happen, but that can always, I mean, that is always a possibility too. And there is no way that these terrorist groups don't know that. But I think that if they are going to resume their activity, if they want to have a resurgence, it is going to focus more on these lone wolf attacks that we've seen here in the States and very much in Europe and France and in Belgium and the United Kingdom. They've had a lot over the past couple decades because they had their own migrant crisis. But I'm not going to dive into this yet, but I'm just going to tell you. Remember how terrorists were using the migrant crisis that was going on in Europe to sneak in terrorists? They even admitted to doing it. And with what was going on with the border right now, we have our own migrant crisis. If they do want a resurgence, that could very well happen here. I'll go more into detail on that later. But what do you guys think? I mean, because it almost seemed to me like the media was trying to get us to regret leaving Afghanistan. I don't think they actually believe that they could change Biden's mind on this. But there's a reason why he led with that when he gave his remarks, because he's still getting criticized just for leaving Afghanistan in the first place. And I don't think that criticism is coming only from neocons. So let's see what you guys got to say. All right. Someone even said that one of the choppers they used to evacuate people from Kabul was also used in Saigon. That would be interesting. I didn't hear that, but that would be very interesting. Can we talk about China's new deal with the Taliban? You know, I wanted to, but I can't fit it into this broadcast. But I will be talking about that because, yeah, they're trying to make some moves there. And honestly, I don't know how successful they're going to be, but we'll see. What else we got here? All right. Are the articles coming? I'm not quite sure what you mean, Shlomo. Got to clarify that a bit so I know what you're talking about so I can answer. Yeah, that's another point, Vlana Crouch. It would have helped if the weapons and equipment had been secured. The Taliban can now use those. Yet another flaw in Biden's planning. We just gave the Taliban like billions and billions of dollars worth of weapons and equipment. That is so horrible. Wow. So I mean, because not only are we leaving, we're now helping the Taliban oppress people because we're arming them. Oh my gosh. Bin Laden notwithstanding, the last two Democrat administrations have been witting or unwittingly aiding and abetting terrorists like the Taliban and in Iran and also in Syria. Yeah, we have been. I laugh because this is so absurd. I don't actually think it's funny. It's just like, why do we do these things? Why do we do it? Why do we do it? All right. So here's the last thing I want to talk about, and really what all of this was leading up to. Probably even the most important part of this whole thing. It's a question. I wrote an article about it. But here's the question. Have we learned our lesson? Has America learned its lesson? We do have a lesson to learn from what's gone on here. I mean, the situation, it's already a disaster, and it's shaping up to be an even worse disaster than we probably even know right now. But have we finally realized that we should never, ever, 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 ever participate in another nation building endeavor ever, ever again? Have we realized that we should never do this? Like, can we all agree now, finally, that we need to stop doing this? I mean, we messed this situation up so badly that it became more profitable for an Afghani soldier to just roll over and give up. And Red State's Holly McKay, she's actually over in that region right now, and she talked about the soldiers and the commanders. And she said, quote, "From my understanding, the level of corruption within the Afghanistan military and the government, that is part of how the Taliban won a lot of this, is they paid the commanders off to surrender a city before. So those who genuinely do want to fight, and there are a lot of men that wanted to genuinely fight, were basically kept in the dark, and the commanders were paid off by the Taliban in advance. The Taliban was smart about this. Evil, but brilliant. Nefarious. How do you nation build from that? We can't. Again, with nations like these, and this isn't me being a bigot, I'm not trying to knock the Afghani people or what have you, but their culture is not the same as ours. And yeah, as Americans, we would like to see them live under an American-style democracy, a republic, but not every country is going to do that. It's just, and it's silly to think that we can force them to. Like Dave said, the best thing that we can do is just model our values as well as possible and do it in a way that makes other people actually want to live a better and more free life. But not everybody wants that. We have countries all over the world that are monarchies, that are dictatorships, that are authoritarian, or, what have you. There's a lot of different types of governments. And not everybody's going to want to do what we have done. We can't keep nation building. We can't keep trying to do this. I mean, even Iraq is an issue. Like, if we don't learn our lesson, we're going to keep doing this over and over again. And to me, when I ask that question, I hope that the answer is yes. But it's very hard for me to be optimistic about that. I asked Dave this question, and I said, "Have we learned our lesson?" And he says, "Yes, we have learned our lesson, at least for the next 18 months." And what he was saying is what I'm going to say, what I was thinking in my head. Yeah, we've learned for now. We've learned for now. We're not going to start nation building again in 2 years. That's not going to happen because we know better now, right? But what happens when, this whole thing wears off? What happens when it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? Republicans and Democrats agree that leaving Afghanistan is the right move. And that doesn't mean that we won't still become complacent. Right now, I like what I'm seeing, because the neocons who want Biden to leave troops there, the neocons who will push for wars in the future, they are being met with scorn and derision, and rightly so. But what happens when a situation arises and people once again start banging the drums of war? And what happens when people like you and I say, "Hey, wait, we don't need to go into this war here. We don't need to try to turn this nation into America Junior. Remember what happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam. We're going to be told, well, I get what you're saying, but this time is different." That phrase right there is why I think that we'll do this again. I don't know when. I don't think it'll be soon, but there will always be a way to say, nope, this time it's different. This time it'll actually work. This time we'll actually succeed. And then we're going to repeat the mistake that we made in Afghanistan. And again, I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope that I'm wrong. And I very well could be. I acknowledge that my theory may not ever come true. Or if it does, it'll be 50 years from now and we'll all be dead by then or what have you. I don't know how old you guys are, but I want to be optimistic, but I'm just saying it's hard. What do you guys think? I mean, are we going to do this again? Are we going to do another Afghanistan again? Let's see what you got to say. Racer Dave, no, power and ego among politicians means it won't stop. Yeah, you know, it's the chutzpah, right? It's the chutzpah of thinking I can take a nation like Afghanistan and turn it into a westernized type of nation. You can't. Now, if that nation actually wants to do that, they can do it themselves. Maybe we can support that, but that doesn't mean that we have to send our troops over there. So that is possible. I'm not saying it's impossible for a nation to change things around. I mean, if you look at Turkey, the modern state of Turkey, I mean, they had a very big turnaround after the World War I, when Mustafa Kemal Ataturk ended up taking over. He transformed that nation into a Western-style democracy. Now, you know what's going on over there right now. I think he's rolling over in his grave. But still, the point remains. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that when we do it, it ain't going to turn out right. Yeah, just like adherence to socialism despite its repeated failures. Yeah. Don't go to, so good question, Daniel. Don't go to war, destroy country, and just leave the rubble. So in Afghanistan, yeah, that's what we should have done. We should have tried to do nation building. We were attacked. They killed 3,000 people. And these people harbored the people who did it and basically helped them kill Americans. So I had no problem with going in there and messing stuff up. If any entity or nation attacks us or helps somebody to attack us, I don't have a problem with using the military. I'm not completely anti-war. I mean, I'm only pro-war when we are attacked. So to me, yeah, because what else are we going to do in Afghanistan? We couldn't have built that nation up. That they were never going to be like us. Or if it does, it's going to take something way more powerful than we are. So yeah, unfortunately, I do say that. But I don't like your scenario if we're just attacking a country just because, you know, they're doing something that we don't like. You know, like with Iraq and Kuwait. If they're, you know, targeting some other country that has nothing to do with us, then yeah, I'm not for it. We need to stay out of their business. If they're threatening us directly, then yeah, we need to do something about it, and we're not obligated to build them into an American-style democracy. Anthony Heckler, what's going on, man? I haven't seen you in a while. All right, what else we got here? Wait, where did I go? Okay, there we go. You know, I did see this. Racer Dave, did you hear the response from the Taliban spokesman when they asked him about free speech? He said to ask Facebook. Oh, man. I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, yeah, Facebook does censor. Taliban has no room to talk, though. I'm not going to go with the Taliban on that. Like, no. You are way worse than Facebook. Be still, peace. I surely hope not. I think both parties are done with war. I hope you're right. I hope so. I mean, because I do agree with you, at least for right now. Like in the short term, yeah, I think we're done with unnecessary wars. Hopefully, keep my fingers crossed. Because there can always be something that pops off. But I do agree with that. I'm thinking more over the long term. Let's see. We will if voters don't pay attention to who they vote for. This should teach us our votes have consequences. Yeah, you're right. You're right. What about Iraq? Leave them also? Yes. Get our troops out of there too. We don't need to be there. Yes, once this memory fades, the war drums will beat. You're right. I like the way you said that too. I wish I had said that in, you know, the article that I've written about it. Unless we have a treaty like Taiwan, in that situation, we should aid them. Maybe. Depends on the situation. I still don't like us getting involved in other stuff. Now, here's the thing. I might be willing to consider certain things here and there, as long as it doesn't involve us putting a bunch of our troops in harm's way. Because even outside of Afghanistan and Iraq, we've got our special forces in Africa and other places like that doing little mini operations here and there. There might be some that I don't agree with and some that I do agree with. If it's a situation where they're addressing something that actually threatens us and they're taking care of it before it happens, I'm okay with it. So, yeah. So if China attacks Taiwan, I'm assuming you say just don't do anything. Yeah, probably. Unless there's an element in that equation that I think would necessitate our involvement, like as in it's going to hurt us. Again, wars happen all the time, all over the world. Are we going to become involved in all of them? And I know you're not arguing that. I'm just saying, how do we pick and choose which ones we get involved in? Now, that doesn't mean I think that we shouldn't do anything to support them. I'm just not sure that we should be sending troops over there. There might be other ways that we can support them as well. Here's the thing. If people really, if it's a situation where other countries are doing it too, I might be more open to it. But we can't police the world. I mean, we can't. We just can't keep doing that. We can't keep intervening wherever we feel like. All right. So got to keep those defense contractors in the money. Yeah, well. But again, I have no problem with us using the military to stop threats before they happen. I mean, if something like that is legitimate, then fine. Like, I'm not into just saying, oh, we should never, ever attack anybody ever. No, I mean, we got to defend ourselves, and we have a right to defend ourselves. So I totally understand that. However, staying in Afghanistan for 20 years was not defending ourselves. Like, we just weren't. At first, yes, definitely. But after that, there was no reason for it to keep going on. But I'm going to go ahead and sign off and enjoy the rest of my Tuesday night. I hope you guys do the same. I will see you on Friday, and I'll also see you in the Twitterverse. I'm going to be interviewing Ross Schumann tomorrow about an idea that he has for police accountability and police reform. He's running for office here in Midland, Texas. So be sure to check that out. It's not going to be live, I don't think. I think I'm just going to record it and then upload it, but I'll be sharing that out. But until next time, keep your minds free.